Good evening, and welcome to the Times Center. I'm Jim Monis, director of the New York Times store. Times Center is starting to look a lot like Madison Square Garden North these days. A few months ago, we had 3 other Knicks here, including Jeremy Lin. In light of the recent free agent signings, Jeremy was in town for about long enough for a cup of coffee, but we had him on this stage. Tonight, Patrick Ewing is in the house. Played for... As you know, Patrick played for the Knicks for 15 years, is one of the great New York legends. I just saw him backstage. I tell you, the guy is big. I am tall at 6'3", but he called me shorty. Yeah, I elbowed him in the knee. Okay. Now, Patrick is the latest of a long string of legends that the New York Times has brought to the Times Center. The New York Times store with Steiner Sports has presented the likes of Derek Jeter, Yogi Berra, Y.A. Tittle, Sam Huff, Whitey Ford, Reggie Jackson, Don Larson, plus Eli Manning twice, Archie Manning, memo to Peyton Manning. We're looking for you. You can run, but we're going to find you. Now let's get into tonight's program. First, the usual announcements. Please silence your cell phones. There's no taking of flash photography. Recording devices are prohibited. And if you have license plate DRH853, please move your car. I'm going to turn the stage over to our first guest and our host. This man is synonymous with autographed sports memorabilia. He is the founder and chairman of Steiner Sports, the largest company of its kind in America. He has built collecting sports memorabilia into an empire. He has a new book coming out with the outrageous title, You Gotta Have Balls. I hope parents put earmuffs on their kids just before I said that remark. But this man is a giant in sports collectible world. Always a friend of the New York Times, Brandon Steiner.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Thank you. What a great day today. God, I love Patrick Ewing. Love him. But before we get to Patrick, I want to introduce you to somebody who's actually a good friend. Love the Syracuse grads, I'm not going to lie. You know, Syracuse grads walks on water. But anyway, David Falk is really one of the first, if not the first, super agent. Obviously, and he's really the first agent that we're going to probably get a kick out of him tonight, amongst other things, with some of the other guys on the stage, including Ewing. But, David was, just did an amazing job really cultivating probably one of the great characters, who's not only a great player, and Michael Jordan, in developing the Air Jordan brand, the movie, and everything else. And he's had just a super roster of clients, including Patrick. So I want to bring out David Falk, who also, the Falk School. He'll tell you a little more about that in a minute, because we're always plugging the Syracuse Falk School. I want to bring out David Falk, a good friend of mine. Thanks for coming, David. He's going to introduce Patrick.
Good evening. I want to first say I'm not endorsing Poland Spring mineral water if I put it up here. I only endorse Gatorade. So a lot of you might be questioning, how does a guy who was born on the island of Jamaica and grows up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, goes to college at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., end up on the Knicks? I'm glad you asked me that, Brandon. And so for those of you who followed the NBA for a long period of time, from the day the league started until 1985, they had a deal where the worst team in the Eastern Conference at the end of the year would flip a coin with the worst team in the Western Conference to decide who had the number 1 pick. Now, there's some very memorable flips. In 1969, the Milwaukee Bucks flipped with the Phoenix Suns. The winner was Kareem Jabbar, who went to the Bucks, and the loser was a guy named Neil Walk. Now, that's really losing when that happens to you and you lose Kareem and end up with Neil Walk. And so by the time we got into the 80s, and David Stern became the commissioner in 1984, he was very concerned that as the year wore on, and yet some really bad teams, there were 23 teams at the time, 7 would not make the playoffs, that the 7 non-playoff teams would tank the games at the end of the year in order to try to get into the coin flip and win the number 1 pick. And so he changed that by instituting a lottery system in 1985 where the 7 teams that didn't make the playoffs had their names in envelopes, sort of like getting invited to a wedding. You had the little, really nice envelopes, and they put them in a drum. And David came out on the 45 days before the draft, and he reached in the drum. Now, at the time, we had just signed Patrick. I was very young. Actually, I had hair back then, which might be hard for some of you to believe. And so we were sitting in this auxiliary gym at Georgetown University, Patrick, myself, Coach Thompson, and the academic coordinator, Mary Fenlon. And they went backwards from 7 to number 1. Number 7 was Golden State, went on. The last 2 teams left were the Indiana Pacers and the New York Knicks. Now, ironically, Patrick, who sometimes could be a little superstitious, wanted to keep his jersey number, and the only 2 teams in the lottery where he could keep his jersey were Indiana and the Knicks. And at the time, those of you who are a little older might remember, there was a famous show on ABC television called The Wide World of Sports. And it started off with this famous skier coming down the ski jump, and he fell off and injured himself. And they would say, like, spanning the globe to bring you the greatest in sports, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. Now, as we were sitting in the Georgetown gym in 1985, and it came down to the Indiana Pacers and the New York Knicks, it was sort of like the wide world of sports. We're either going to be in the thrill of victory in Madison Square Garden or the agony of defeat, no disrespect to Indiana, in the Midwest. And so a lot of people have theorized, how was David Stern able to determine which envelope was the Knicks? So he could pick. Now, the Knicks in the previous 2 years had won a total of 46 games, 22 and 24. So they really needed Patrick Ewing. Some people theorize that David Stern had the Knicks envelope coated in dry ice. So when he reached in, blind, he could feel around for the cold envelope, and he knew which one was the Knicks. Some people thought that he had these special infrared glasses, and the Knicks lettering sort of stood out when he reached in. He could tell which one it was. It was sort of like one of these Oliver Stone conspiracy theories. But whatever the reason was, on that date, 45 days before the draft in 1985, David Stern reached in and picked out the Knicks envelope, and Patrick became a Knick. And on August 20th of that year, he became the highest paid player in the history of the league. He became the first player ever with an early termination option, which some of you might know by this guy named Dwight Howard, who's been sort of dickering back and forth for a couple of days over whether he's going to be in the contract or out of the contract. And he's gone on to become the greatest Knick of all time, a Hall of Fame player, one of the really special people in my career, a true gentleman, a dear friend for 26, 27 years. It's my great pleasure and honor to introduce my dear friend, Patrick Ewing.
I think I'm supposed to go sit over here.
Right in the middle.
I was saying before we had gotten started in the green room, I was saying, for a big guy, he hid very well. Very hard to get him for the sit down. Ask him some questions. Very hard.
I'm used to being incognito. I can morph into that building or the doors over there or in the background. I have great skills of being able to hide.
But when I think of you, though, and I always, it was always the first question if I was with John, if I was with Mace or somebody I was, what kind of guy is Patrick Ewing? And never did one of your teammates say anything other than, you're the best teammate they ever had. Loved you. Never went into your pocket though once. But not that. But if you lent somebody $1,
I want it back.
You wanted that $1 back.
With interest.
Right? Yeah. He would have that kind
taught him
of.
that.
It wasn't that he was cheap. He actually picked up some tabs, but it was like if you lent money or something like that.
Oh, definitely want it back.
Yeah. But teammates loved you. Other than sometimes, which we'll talk about a little bit, some huddle stuff. Maybe we'll get to that with Mason later. But I guess the first question is, you played a little cricket, you played a little soccer. Why basketball?
Well, being that first of all, before I start, everybody, I don't even know why you guys asked David to introduce me. It's very long-winded. I've been out there standing. I'm like, my feet's starting to hurt. My back's hurting.
He was good. He was probably good in those negotiations.
Very good, very good.
He probably wore out a lot of general managers.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Oh, the best agent in the world. best agent in the world. Have nothing but respect for this man. But I started playing basketball, you know, like David said, I grew up in Jamaica. Moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts when I was 12. Didn't know what basketball was. You know, saw some guys playing it on the playground. They asked me to play. Played it, fell in love with it from day one, and here I am today. After many years of, you know, ups and downs, you know, more ups than downs, and you know, I was able to do something that I loved.
What role did your father play in your career early on?
My father played no role in my basketball career. He didn't know what a basketball was, but he played a great role in my life. My father is a very soft-spoken man, very humbled, but he's a great father, great role model. Got up every day, went to work, worked hard, put food on our table.
Was a mechanic, probably working 2 jobs, or?
Well, you know, first he worked in a factory, worked in a factory in Jamaica, worked in a hose factory here in America when I first got here. Then he had a terrible injury, broke his arm. Then he was a janitor at Mass General Hospital in Boston. But you know, it's funny, like I said, my father didn't know anything about basketball. But now, everyone in my family, they all became expert. Everybody's an expert now. I'm like, did you guys play this game? You know, I come home, they're telling me, you know, well, you guys need to do this, need to do that. If you can do this, that, and that, you'll be able to win. I'm like, come on now. When did you guys start playing or coaching? But no, I mean, I have a great family, and you know, we all love each other.
And was high school, you hear the different stories about high school. Was it tough playing high school? Did people give you a hard time? You're obviously a big kid. What was that like?
First of all, you know, back in those days in Boston was very racist.
If you weren't white, you were a little on the
right.
If you weren't white, you weren't right. Yeah,
You weren't right.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, it was what it was. It's changed a lot.
Yes.
You know, but I had my family was great. The friends and that I met there are all great. We're still friends today. We still go hang out. They come up to New York, or I go to Boston, or they come visit me wherever I am. You know, we're all still great friends. You know, the community itself was great of Cambridge.
Before we get to probably the worst decision you ever made in his life, we'll get to that in a second. What was, like, before we get to your college decision, what was it like, though, you know, what's it like for you these days off the field? Like, what's important to you? Like, where are you at with your kids, charity work, your Orlando Magic, or what's? Well,
definitely family is the most important thing to me. You know, my kids, my son, he's the oldest, and I have 3 other girls, 3 girls, one's at Fordham, and one's in high school, and I have a 4-year-old. So I got some out of the house, and I started back over again. You know, I don't know what I was thinking. You know.
You probably weren't.
But it's great, you know, because she keeps me young.
Yes.
I have to run around chasing around the house. But family is very important. You know, coaching. I'm coaching now, so my coaching is very important. Also, you know, giving back. You have to give back.
Any particular thing on their charity agenda? Anything you're doing that's?
I don't have one particular charity that I support, but I do everything. You know, breast cancer. I'm big on breast cancer because one of my older sisters passed away of breast cancer, so I'm big in that. Or pediatric AIDS, which is something that I supported when I was here playing. I still try to support.
It was probably with Pat Riley back in those days. Yes. Your older son, how's he doing? You know,
he's doing good.
So close to becoming anything with.
Should have been a Nick. Should have been a Nick. He should have been a Nick, but it wasn't in the cards for him.
He's doing okay.
He's going to play in Germany next year. He's going to play in Germany. You know, finally decide that, you know what, it's time to get out of Dad's pocket. So I'm gonna go make my own.
What was your secret?
I'm gonna go make my own living.
So we get to the college thing. I mean, first of all, you must have been highly touted. What made you decide, and what other schools that were looking at you, and how hard a decision was it to go to Georgetown, or?
Well, I know both of you guys went to Syracuse, but I chose the best school. Georgetown was a great university, great Catholic school, a great Jesuit university.
Played for a great coach.
Played for a great coach. When David and I were talking when we were on the ride over here from the hotel, and we were talking about the schools that I was visiting. UCLA was my second choice. And I remember going on my visit to UCLA, and I'm sitting around like, oh my God, how can you go to school here? All of the young ladies are walking around in short skirts, short shorts. I'm like, how can you study? The weather is nice. I'm back in Jamaica. I'm like,
They
no.
probably brought out a few extra ones that particular day too.
But they let me get back on that plane. Once I got back on the plane, I'm like, man, this is a 6 hours flight. It's a 6 hour flight. My family, how are they gonna get back and forth? But no, Georgetown was my first choice. John Thompson was the main reason. He played the position, and as a young black man, seeing another black man who spoke the way that he spoke and carried himself the way that he carried himself was somebody that I could aspire to be like.
The T-shirt underneath the jersey, I just have to ask you that.
I was cold.
Was you one of the first to wear that? No,
I wasn't the first. A lot of other people wore it, but I was the one who made it famous.
Well, take us through the magical run, though. You had what a great squad. I mean, you had a great 4 years there. But take us through the magical run and also the big game against the Keem.
I had a great college career.
You didn't shoot much.
Well, back then, I had a lot of other guys do all the shooting, but I made up for it when I got to New York. Excuse me. No, my college career was great. Played with a lot of great teammates. Still a very good friends with a lot of them. Excuse me. Went to the NCAA final game 3 out of my 4 years. Was only able to win it once.
How tough was the game against the Keem?
Very tough.
How good was he?
Very good.
Had to be good to get picked. Had to get good to be picked over Jordan, but I mean, you think about it, he got picked over Jordan.
So did Sam Bowie.
Yeah, true. I mean,
the funny thing is back then, you picked. The philosophy was, you pick size over everything.
yeah, absolutely. You always go for the big man, hard to find.
Right.
But he was so talented. Were you a little nervous before that? Are you nervous when you go back then as a kid going into those big games?
No, I wasn't nervous.
You felt you just.
I was. You know what? My first high school game, I was nervous.
We have to move up to Georgetown.
We can do a
topic.
commercial for cough medicine here.
Allergies.
When you're
are
feeling
killing
like
me.
this,
I was nervous my first high school game. I scored 1 point and fouled out in 1 point and fouled out in like 6 minutes. That's how nervous I was.
And were you a freshman or?
I was a freshman.
Oh.
We played the same team my senior year for the state championship. I told all my friends, I said, you know what? I was nervous the first time we played them. Now I'm gonna see 4 years later, I'm a senior now. I'm gonna get 41 points. We're gonna cream them. I'm gonna get 40, but the 1 point was for the 1 point I scored back then. I'm gonna make up for it. So I had 41. We killed them.
David mentioned that, your number 33. Why is that your favorite number, and where does that come from?
Well, it wasn't my favorite number. I wore 32 in high school. Somebody else asked me that downstairs. In high school, I wore 32, but when I got to Georgetown, Eric Smith had 32, and they gave me 55, who they also gave to Mutombo, but he didn't care. I said, Coach, 55, I don't see myself as being 55. Give me 33, at least it's close to 32. So there I go, it ended up with 33.
Well, then why, when you went, I just got to jump ahead here for a second, but why when Seattle you jumped off of 33 or 32?
6, the Olympics.
6. Oh, the Olympics.
Right.
That was that.
Plus 3 and 3.
Okay, I mean.
You learned that at Georgetown.
No, I was 33 in Seattle. I was 33 in Orlando. I was 6.
In Orlando, you were 6.
Right.
Okay.
Because Nick Anderson. Right?
Tell me, give me a good John Thompson story, because not enough, honestly, and I'm not going to beat John up here without him here, but he was one of the great coaches of all time, and he probably doesn't get the props. Really doesn't. I mean, when you think about it, one of the great coaches.
Right.
He definitely changed a lot of the way things happened. Tell me a John Thompson story. Tell me something, an impact he had with you as a player, whether it be in a game or in a conversation, maybe in practice.
I don't have one particular story that I can give you. All I know is that one of the reasons I am the person that I am today was a big part of was I have to give to him. A lot of times in practice, he would stop practice and teach us, not only about the game of basketball, but also about life. That you have to do the right thing, you have to get a good education, because at some point the ball's going to stop bouncing, and you have to be able to move on and take care of your family. He brought other people into the gym who have been successful, working for different companies, be it Coca-Cola or whoever else. And to show us that there is life after basketball. I have nothing but respect for him.
Well, I guess I got to ask you.
I got a great job. Patrick Ewing, John Thompson story. So when Patrick was a junior, no one had ever left Georgetown early in the history of the program. And John called me one spring afternoon, just a casual conversation. And towards the end, he said, what do you think about the idea of Patrick leaving school as a junior? And I said, well, I don't think it's a very good idea. So why not? I said, well, I read that he promised his mom that he was going to finish college, and his mom died in his junior year. I know he wants to finish. And he said, David, that's ridiculous. For $1 million a year, he can get plenty of education. So I still don't think he should leave. He's probably not going to be the number 1 pick. And, Olajuwon, Houston's going to have the number 1 pick. He's a local guy. Probably won't go number 1. And we got into a very long discussion now. Those of you who know John, and John is my hero in life, so I say this with love. He could use words that you don't find in Webster's dictionary every day. And we got into a very heated discussion, and he basically was cursing me out. At the end, he said to me, look, you're telling me what you think I want to hear, but you're wrong. I want Patrick to leave because I think he can't take the risk that he'll get hurt, and he'll hurt his career. And I was so upset by this time. I figured I've just ruined my relationship with this guy. So I said, look, John, do whatever the hell you want, but my advice is keep him in school. He's not going to get amnesia and forget how to play. You could buy a disability policy to cover the risk, and he's not going to go number 1. And he came back to school, and a year later signed a contract that was 50% larger than any other player in the history of the league. Veteran, Kareem was the highest paid player at signed. And so the day we signed was August 20th, 1985. And we're in the Knicks offices, and Patrick had a $5 million signing bonus, which is almost bigger than Olajuwon's whole contract the year before. So they give Patrick the check, and I said, well, give me that check. I made him sign it on the back for deposit only, and I came back to Washington, and I took it to a photo engraver, and I had to make 3 bronze copies of the check. I kept one. I put it on a little plaque. I gave one to Patrick, and I sent one to John, and I wrote him a note. I said, dear coach, I told you so. the plaque made the wall, but the note didn't.
Nice collectible, by the way. How tough was it, though, going back there from your side of it? Because at that time you weren't allowed to talk to David. But was that a tough decision to stay the fourth year? Or?
No, it wasn't. Like David said, I made a promise to my mother. And plus, I was enjoying my college experience. I made a lot of friends. I grew. I tell people this. I went to college a boy and I left a man. I went in, a young, naive kid, and I was able to leave with a better understanding of life.
I hate to go there, but I will.
And we kicked Syracuse ass every chance we got.
I started looking up that record. Left that behind. That was not a good few years. That was not a good few years. But while we're kind of, in that particular dirty bucket of water, what happened against Nova? What do you think what happened that night? Because that was an odd night.
That's still a bad
I think
subject.
if you play 100 times, you probably beat them 99.
Right. We played them.
You did play them a bunch.
We played them, but that year we played them, I think, 4 times. They beat us that one. They beat us that one time.
What's going on in the huddle during that game? Because these guys are like out of their minds. They're shooting out of their minds.
We thought we was gonna win.
You still always thought till the very end you were
Right.
going to come back and figure that out.
Right.
So you guys were
thought we was
relentless
gonna win.
defensively. You're known for that. But they just shot 70%?
They had to play a almost perfect game to beat us.
Yeah.
You have to take your hats off to them. And it's funny. This is years later. I'm at took a year off from work, and I'm at a Georgetown game. Georgetown playing Villanova, and I'm sitting across from the Villanova bench, and I see Dwayne McClain, who I played against in high school. Also, he was sitting behind the bench, and I see there was another guy sitting there next to him, and he's he's like pointing. Pointing that they beat us. So I told Dwayne to come over. I'm like, so who's this guy? He's like, I'm like, I don't even know who the hell he is, but he's gonna be sitting there talking about we beat you. And I also tell him he's in the wrong city to be doing that. He's in D.C. This is not Philadelphia.
But it does get personal, that stuff. I mean, it's hard to overcome that, or you can kind of put that.
I still have not overcome it. I mean, I still don't even watch it. Even when we did the piece for was it ESPN?
The 30 for 30.
Yeah, it's still rough.
How about the Freddie Brown thing with North Carolina? Harder or no?
No, this one, losing to Villanova, definitely harder. Freddie, that mistake happens all the time.
Do you think Jordan was that good?
Back then?
Yeah.
No one knew that he would be as good as he became.
Did you sense him on the court being, something special?
He was good, but not
that good.
Not that good. We came out of high school together. We played in the McDonald's All-American games and all that stuff together. You knew he was good. You knew he was talented. But to be the greatest player in my era, no.
Sad. Is it sad to see the Big East kind of break up like this?
Very sad. Very sad. In schools that helped to start it, to shape it, definitely sad to see it and go, all because of football. They need to get rid of the football program.
Or it would have been good if a couple schools had a football program. But, that's ultimately was the downfall,
Right.
The Villanovas and the... But were you at the last game in the Manley Fieldhouse?
No, that's the year before me. Manley Fieldhouse is officially closed.
That's a sore issue too.
Sleepy Floyd, John Bebe Doran. I think it was a couple years before me.
I think there are people still sitting there wondering what